So, welcome everybody to today's local government education program, our annual state legislative update, brought to you by University of Illinois Extension and the Illinois Association of County Board Members. My name is Mike Delaney, and I'm an Extension Community and Economic Development Educator based here in Northern Illinois. We'll begin with some quick housekeeping notes familiar to most folks who've been part of our programs in the past and pretty much every Zoom recording that's been made in the last half a decade. We'll be recording today's webinar and making it available on our Community and Economic Development YouTube channel. After the conclusion of today's presentation, registered participants will receive an email with slides and a link to the recording of the webinar. So if you didn't register in advance for the webinar, maybe got the link from a friend or a colleague, and you'd like to receive the materials, please drop your email into the chat box to let us know that you'd like to get those recordings. And we will add you to our subscribers list as well, so you'll get advance notice for future programming. Please note that if you desire, you can activate Zoom's closed captioning functioning at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate button. As always, you are welcome at any time to share your questions in the Zoom chat space. We'll be reviewing the questions in a Q&A period following the main presentation. So we're happy to welcome back to this long-running educational series our presenters for today, Kelly Murray and Taylor Anderson. Kelly has served as Executive Director for the Illinois Association of County Board Members since 1997. She's a registered lobbyist, has served several state boards, and has over 2 decades of experience in local government relations. In 2008, Kelly founded the Certified County Officials Program to provide professional education and training opportunities for county government officials. She's also a founder of the Institute for Excellence in County Governance in partnership with the University of Illinois. Taylor is a legislative consultant with the association and a full-time registered contractual lobbyist in the state of Illinois, and he spent nearly a decade working with the Illinois General Assembly. Prior to his lobbying activities, Taylor worked with the Illinois Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Division, and he's also worked with the Illinois Association of County Board Members and Commissioners, organizing seminars for county officials. So again, welcome to all of you. Thank you both, Kelly and Taylor, for being here today. And Kelly, the microphone is yours.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank Mike and the University of Illinois Extension for hosting this annual webinar. I know Mike kind of referenced that we've been partnered with the University of Illinois Extension since the 1990s to provide educational programs for local government leaders. And today's webinar is annual, and it's a component of that ongoing partnership. So we appreciate this opportunity. Today, we're going to be presenting on new laws for 2026 that passed during the first year of the 104th Illinois General Assembly, primarily that impact local governments. As you all know, the Illinois General Assembly runs on a 2-year cycle. Legislators are not limited on the number of bills they can introduce and sponsor. So in the first year of a standard session, on average, we can see anywhere from 6,000 to 7,000 bills introduced for consideration. In the second year, that count decreases considerably. So we are approaching that second year in 2026, where we might see an average of maybe 2,500 to 3,500 bills, kind of cuts in half. This comes in addition to sponsored resolutions and constitutional amendments. So the tracking of legislation can be very heavy at times, but as session advances, eventually lawmakers focus on primary issues of interest to their constituents, including local governments and the state as a whole. Upon introduction, bills they're assigned to committees in both chambers, as you probably know, and keep in mind that not all bills will be called and they get advanced from committees to the Senate and the House floor. So the number of active bills reduces considerably over session as it advances. So we'll see that again in 2026 as we get started here later this month. It's important to recognize that we often refer in our presentations also to shell bills. And if you're not familiar with those, these are most often introduced by leaders from both sides of the aisle, and they simply make a grammatical change to state statute and makes the bill active. And then these are often bulk passed through committees and then used throughout session to place an amendment on, and oftentimes they move very quickly throughout the legislative process. So it's not unusual to see an amendment posted to a shell bill and they advance to the floor within an hour. So I'm just giving you kind of a little background on how you might see 6,000 to 7,000 bills introduced, and it gets funneled down to about 400 and some that passed this first year. And that is the reason why. We see bills start out with an essential number and sometimes those change. So you'll have some references to that today. Veto session, the 2025 veto session concluded on Friday. It was October 31st. I think it was around 4:30 a.m. in the morning. Which is again, not unusual. We're used to that happening at the end of session going into the late night hours and the early morning hours. So two proposed Senate bills that were the most significant that we feel for local governments that came out of the veto session was Senate Bill 25. That's an energy omnibus bill, which is focused also on battery energy storage. Now, this has been sent to the governor. He has not signed it yet. We assume that's going to take place in the coming days, but we will reference that today. Along with Senate Bill 2111, this was a transportation governance and funding reform bill for the Chicago region. And I'm sure you've heard a little bit about those two bills in your local news, and we'll talk about that today. Both measures ultimately passed after agreements during veto session. So again, we want you to understand these were two of the heaviest coming out of the veto session with respect to how negotiations went. Now, looking at the current calendar we're in for the spring 2026 session, the Senate, excuse me, is scheduled to meet about 48 days between starting January 13th through May 31st. And then we're going to have the House is going to meet, I think it starts on January 20th for about 45 days. So even though we're looking at 5 months, the days each month are limited, and you're going to see some of those days canceled. So it'll be a little lighter session than first year. Due to the time limitations today, we're going to present mainly on some notable legislation. I'm going to circle back with you at the end of the presentation, and then we'll share some resources that we have available in addition to our 2025 new laws summary. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor and he can get us started on the slides. Taylor?
Happy New Year's and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go through, as Kelly mentioned, the bills that were passed by the General Assembly and signed into law by the governor. There are a couple exceptions that we're still waiting on gubernatorial action, but we do anticipate the governor signing those bills. As Kelly correctly mentioned, 2026 is the second year of the 104th General Assembly, and we typically see the number of bills introduced and the number of bills passed slightly less than what we would see in the first year. So for reference, you'll note that Kelly's marked down that there's 6,937 bills introduced last year. Usually we see that number cut about in half. So for 2026, we should see somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,500 to 4,000 bills or so. Again, that number gets whittled down significantly as bills move through the process before they're sent to the governor's desk. With that, we'll jump into some of the bills that were passed this past year and signed into law. The first bill we'll discuss today is Senate Bill 69. This bill we wanted to highlight because it's part of a trend we've started to see. This isn't necessarily to take a position on the particulars of this bill, but we have started to notice more bills in this vein where we're seeing mandates on what needs to be included as part of what's covered by insurance policies. And that's a national trend. What we're also seeing, partly due because of some of these increased mandates, is the policies, the premiums for these insurances go up. And obviously that has an impact on you all as employers. This specific bill will now say starting at the beginning of January 1st of 2027, health insurance policies must provide coverage for essentially horse therapy. They need to be performed by a licensed therapist. It has to be, the programs have to go through all the necessary certifications, but starting 2027, your health insurance policies will need to cover these types of therapy. Again, we are starting to see more mandates and more things that must be covered, and that will have some corresponding impacts on the cost of these policies. But wanted just to make sure you all were aware of this specific bill, but also the larger trend we're starting to see, where some of these more unique or nuanced or niche type therapies now becoming required coverages. And so again, that's going to have some ancillary costs that you all will have to account for as you move forward in trying to find the best health insurance policies for your communities and for your employees. The next bill we'll discuss is Senate Bill 642. This was a pared down version of a larger omnibus property tax bill that had been worked on for multiple years. It was attempted to pass during the spring session. The Senate had a version, the House had a version. They couldn't ultimately agree on what versions they wanted to move forward with. And so neither bill moved forward in the second chamber. That means the House bill didn't move forward in the Senate, and the Senate bill didn't move forward in the House. Over the summer and into veto session, members of the General Assembly continued to work with one another and with stakeholders, and ultimately passed Senate Bill 642 during the fall veto session. What's important, or what we wanted to highlight for you all, is essentially what this bill, the main portion of what this bill will do, is it will increase the homestead, the senior freeze homestead exemption. It's been quite some time since we last saw an increase. I think it was 2018 or so, where the General Assembly moved that threshold from 55,000 to 65,000. Originally, that increase took place in Cook, and then it spread to other counties. And this is going to move that 65,000 to 75,000 in 2026, 77,000 in 2027, and it will cap it at 79,000 in 2028. The reason why General Assembly members felt that this was something they really need to focus on is twofold. One, obviously, Illinois continues to struggle with some of the nation's highest property taxes. And so General Assembly members, always are trying to find ways to provide relief. Obviously, particularly to, seniors who are most vulnerable to potentially losing their homes because of increasing property taxes. But another big point for moving this bill forward is what's we've seen at the federal level with regards to Social Security. There has been Social Security payment increases, and so we've started to experience seniors who previously qualified for their senior homestead exemption because their income was less than 65,000. They've started to creep up. There's talks of another bump to Social Security as well. Whether or not that happens, we'll see. But because of that, the General Assembly really wanted to make sure that folks who might have been receiving $64,000, and because of that increase, we're receiving 66 or 67 or even 70. They wanted to get ahead of this problem and head this off, and so that's why we're starting to see, or that's why we saw this bill move forward. Again, there's a cap in 2028, so it will cap out at 79,000, which is almost 80. And then also counties can establish, structured payment processes to work with homeowners trying to struggle to pay their unpaid taxes. And so you can kind of craft a payment plan that has a redemption period to hopefully help folks who maybe haven't paid their taxes on their property kind of catch up. So we do anticipate there probably being more conversations. As I mentioned, this was a pared down version of a much larger property tax, omnibus property tax bill, and those conversations continue. One of the issues, and we won't spend too much time on it, but just did want to talk about it, is the General Assembly. General Assembly is very concerned, and rightly so, with the decision and Tyler v. Hennepin, which has to deal with, excuse me, foreclosure sales
Oh, no, that they can't.
so we're there. That issue is still going to be heavily discussed. Members of the General Assembly are working with other stakeholders and ourselves to try to craft language to help protect counties and create a system moving forward that meets the constitutional threshold that ruling now set, but also, doesn't bankrupt counties because of the potential exposure to liability that Supreme Court ruling kind of created. So a lot of work is going to still need to be done around property taxes, around foreclosure, and county sales on homes. And so there's a lot more work to be done in 2026 around property taxes. So we will absolutely send notices out and keep folks informed about that as those conversations and discussions continue. The next bill is Senate Bill 1380, and this deals around utility pole and cameras. Obviously, we've started to see a lot more local governments utilize, cameras, for safety issues. This essentially allows counties and municipalities to utilize publicly owned utility poles and the public rights of way for safety related equipment. This will hopefully help streamline, the deployment of these cameras where, local communities decide that it's best. And hopefully this will limit significant financial burdens placed on local governments as they try to move forward with this. There's going to be some capped fees that utility pole owners would be able to charge. Hopefully those are pretty minimal. Again, the idea is to streamline and make it a little easier for local governments to place cameras and safety related equipment in those areas where they really feel that they're needed, even on poles that maybe the local government themselves doesn't own, or in those right of ways where the utilities have their poles and there's not a structure there for the local government or a structure that the local government owns. So we're happy to see this pass. Again, this won't affect everyone. A lot of counties already have cameras in place or have poles that they own in place, but this should provide a little bit more flexibility moving forward. Senate Bill 1723 is another bill that we really wanted to highlight. This is more regional. This really only impacts primarily central Illinois. But this is an issue that we talked about last year with regards to what we were seeing with carbon capture and sequestration. There was a lot of concern during those conversations that the wells where the sequestration is being done would be too close to aquifers, and particularly the Muhammad Aquifer, which is one of the largest aquifers in the state. Somewhere between 500,000 to 800,000 people utilize the Muhammad Aquifer for their drinking water. And there's a real concern that we were going to see carbon sequestration wells nearby or underneath or going through the Muhammad Aquifer or other large aquifers that provide a lot of drinking water for people. And so the General Assembly, after passing the original carbon sequestration bill, had been working and came back and created this bill, which protects the Muhammad Aquifer and other aquifers like it. One of the things it does is it kind of prohibits for a period of time, the drilling through or underneath and surrounding aquifers. And then it also creates a commission to really do a deep dive to look at how close and where it's appropriate for these sequestration and carbon capture wells to go, and how nearby they can be to aquifers, and again, specifically the Muhammad aquifer. I just want to remind people that, carbon capture and sequestration is still a relatively new phenomenon. It's not a new technology. We've been drilling holes on the ground for a very long time, but taking carbon and capturing and storing it underground, especially near drinking water, is still somewhat new. And so this, I think, just gives the state a little better handle on what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what's safe, what's not safe, but still allows for carbon capture and sequestration to move forward in the state, but provides, I think, some needed safety and some guardrails around where those things are stored and where those wells are drilled. So we're very happy to see this, coming from Central Illinois. Love to see that we're protecting, again, the upwards of 500,000 people or so who utilize the Muhammad Aquifer daily for their drinking water. Senate Bill 1827 is the next bill. We've seen these bills really kind of come up in the last, I want to say 5 years or so, where the design build process has really grown and has provided a lot of opportunities for savings to units of local government. And again, this is where you hire one company and they both design and build and construct whatever project. Again, it was only 5 years or so where we saw instead of having to put out multiple bids to A, do a design, and then the B, actually hire a firm to do the construction. There's some cost savings involved where under one RFP, you can have one company kind of help care and do both. This bill just expands on that a little bit. Oh, excuse me. It says that certain firms, don't need to be disqualified solely due to having previously been awarded a project. It just kind of allows for those design build firms to continue to bid on projects, again, where it makes sense. There's been a lot of exploration and, again, cost savings utilizing this design build process, and kind of just makes it a little easier that if you do a phase one response, nothing prohibits you as a county from proceeding with the phase two evaluation from a single respondent, if you think that's in the best interest of your county. And again, we've seen a lot of cost savings by utilizing this process. For some projects, it really makes sense. For other projects, maybe it doesn't. But again, just allowing a little bit more flexibility for you all to manage your resources and move forward with the best firms and the most cost-efficient responses you can get at the county level. Senate Bill 1953 deals with officer employment records. This was in response to the tragedy that happened in Sangamon County and the murder of Sonia Massey. For those of you who may not be familiar, didn't follow, one of the problems or a problem that I think was heavily focused upon after this tragedy was the fact that the officer involved in this murder had been released from several different law enforcement agencies, and none of those agencies notified the next agency down the line about the issues that they let go of this officer for. And so this, excuse me, this says that a law enforcement agency must submit a written request if they want to know about the job history or employment history of an applicant to a prior existing law enforcement agency. It also does provide some safeguards. If you're in County A and there's a sheriff's deputy, let's say that has some personnel issues or infractions and is let go of by that county, if you receive that written request from another law enforcement agency, you're going to have some immunity from lawsuits when you disclose or release the personnel files, and if you comply with the procedures that's outlined by this law. And that's very important. We in Illinois have pretty strict guardrails around what information and personnel files can be disclosed from a previous employer. And this protects counties. And so again, I think the impetus behind this bill is to make sure that those quote unquote bad apples in law enforcement don't get to move to a new law enforcement agency and are protected from their bad actions, being acknowledged or transmitted to whatever law enforcement agency that officer is seeking to have employ them next. Senate Bill 2044 is a bill that has been discussed for a while, and really we saw this kind of come out of, excuse me, the pandemic. Obviously, when a lot of work was done remotely, people weren't meeting, and a lot of things were done via the internet. There just were things that came to light, and one of the things that was noticed pretty early on was that for a lot of signatures on official documents, you could not do that over the web. And so this just allows for a little modernization where now local governments are going to be able to utilize web-based signatures on official documentation. And so I'm sure we've all utilized DocuSign and other technologies like that. This just makes it so now that units of local government for their official documents can also utilize some of those services that really exploded during the pandemic. So happy to see a little bit more flexibility provided to local governments and modernization as we continue to move forward in our tech-based world. Another bill that we were happy to see advance and become law is Senate Bill 2129. Over the almost 20 years I've been lobbying on behalf of units of local government, one of the consistent things I hear about is some of the uncertainty that can take place when a local government places an application in to IDOT for a project, whether or not IDOT is going to do that project, how long it's going to take for IDOT to respond to that application. So this essentially requires that IDOT establish an online portal for local governments where you can submit documents electronically. And then IDOT is supposed to, once that's done, once the form is in this portal, you're going to be able to go back and check this portal and see what's the status of your application. Again, just provides a little bit more transparency with IDOT. I think a little bit more certainty as far as where you're at in the process. I'm really happy to see that this bill is law now, and that IDOT will be required to move forward with this. I think the big question for me is how long this is going to take IDOT to get set up, how well this portal is going to work. My hope is even if it does take perhaps a little while, that IDOT sees the utility in this. And so instead of having to pick up the phone and placing a phone call into your zone, you can just log into the online portal and say, okay, my application is in the review process, or it's been approved, or et cetera, et cetera. So again, just happy to see the state utilizing some of the technology that we have and hopefully make life a little easier between local governments and this particular state agency. Senate Bill 2111, as Kelly mentioned, is the large omnibus transportation bill. There was a huge crisis that General Assembly members spent at least 2 years on. I don't know how many committee hearings this bill had. I do know that they took this show on the road, so to speak, and there were committee hearings done throughout the state in various regions on this topic. The big impetus behind this bill was the $750 million budget deficit that the regional transportation authorities in northern Cook and the surrounding counties were facing in the city of Chicago. But there were also some challenges that we were seeing from downstate regional transportation authorities as well. And so this bill raises about $1.5 billion in new annual funding. It does it through a variety of different methodologies, but I will say one of the things the General Assembly I thought cleverly did is none of that 1.5 billion. Again, this is 1.5 billion annually. None of those dollars are raised via new taxes, and so that's I thought particularly nice to see. There's a handful of things. The largest cost driver or the largest drivers of revenue for raising that $1.5 billion is primarily done through two things. One is an increase in tolls. So all of our toll systems will see a percentage increase, and then that's now going to be tied with CPI. And then utilizing a large chunk of excuse me, investment returns that are sitting in the road fund. So that's the primary driver for creating that $1.5 billion. I believe there was 5 or 6 different methodologies to raise those funds. But again, happy to see that it wasn't done via new taxes. Excuse me. I will say the bulk of that $1.5 billion in annual funding will be going towards the Chicago region. A little bit of that money will be spread out among downstate, but the vast majority of those dollars will be going to Chicago and their surrounding areas. So just wanted to point that out. But I do know that several downstate regional authorities testified in support of the bill and were in the Capitol building as this bill was being discussed during veto session. And so they were excited to see some of those increases. This just kind of highlights some important particulars of the bill. Again, it's one of the big things is improving the transit connectivity between all the various transportation agencies in the northeastern Illinois region. And then another thing just want to point out is this prohibits local governments from imposing minimum parking requirements for developments located near public transportation hubs. And the hope is that this will reduce some construction costs and encourage developers to really focus on transit-oriented types of development versus having cars and taking up real estate with parking lots. So we'll see how this works. But again, just wanted to highlight these couple of things just to make sure folks were aware of it moving forward. We'll move into House bills now. House Bill 1312 is another bill that was passed during the fall veto session. This is known as the Illinois Bivens Act and prohibits immigration enforcement officials inside or within 1,000 feet of courthouses, hospitals, daycare centers, university campuses, and also creates a private right of action for these constitutional violations, including statutory damages of $10,000, and requires hospitals to adopt policies regarding interactions with law enforcement agents. Now, obviously, we're all aware of what led to this law. I will note that during discussion of this bill, the sponsors and all of the members of the General Assembly kind of acknowledged that this bill was going to be facing legal challenges, and there's already been a lawsuit that's been filed by United States Department of Justice. And I think the constitutionality of this is really in question. At the heart of it is whether or not a state can oppose such a policy on federal agents. And so this is something that's going to play out in the courts. We don't know where that decision is going to go, ultimately where they're going to land. And so we'll just see. But this bill did pass. It was signed into law. And now it's in the hands of the court. So it's something we'll continue to inform you all about as it moves through and once a decision is made, probably at the Supreme Court level. House Bill 1615 is another kind of courthouse adjacent bill. This allows a county courthouse to fly the US flag prominently on the grounds instead of on top of the courthouse, which was in law previously. All courthouses were required to fly a flag if they were flying the flag on top of the courthouse. My understanding is this came because one specific county had made some renovations and some changes to the courthouse, and the courthouse now had a flat roof. And because of the design of that roof, you couldn't really see the flag when you were walking near or to the courthouse. And so they felt it was much better to have that flag on the ground level so people could see it and enjoy it. So just a small change, but particularly of interest for any of the counties that have an old courthouse and might need to make some changes, or are building a new courthouse and are kind of looking at how to design it. This just, again, provides a little bit more flexibility about where that flag can be placed. House Bill 2336 is the Local Government Emergency Lift Assist Bill. This is an issue I want to say that we've really started to see a lot more, again, the last handful of years, right before the pandemic, but certainly I think even through the pandemic, we, were made aware that this was a growing problem. Primarily behind the problem is where you have, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and even private residents where, someone has fallen or someone, caretaker is having difficulty moving the person under their care. And so they would call into EMTs or firefighters and have them come, not to necessarily perform an emergency or response to an emergency, but to provide a lift assist, and whether that's out of bed or out of a restroom or to a restroom or to a bed. We were really starting to see these impact, the ability for emergency responders to respond to emergencies, and also the costs associated with these calls. I think what really kind of stuck out to me is you would have either assisted living facilities or nursing homes, or again, even private residents, where they would be making calls, 6 times, 7 times a week, to have emergency responders come out and do these lifts assist. So this is the first step. We'll see if this is enough. Right now, this bill only impacts assisted living facilities and nursing homes. It does not do anything to impact a lift assist at private residences. And this only allows for, a municipality or fire protection district to collect fees after the 6 lift assists provided that year to assisted living facility or to a nursing home. So essentially now they're going to get 6 free lift assists. And then after that, the 7th and so on, the local government's gonna be able to collect a fee. I think there was some conversation about whether 6 is the right number. Again, as I mentioned previously, we're aware of local governments where it would be 6 a week or 15 a month. So we'll see if 6 is the right number. But this conversation, I think, is going to be ongoing. And again, as I mentioned, this does not include private residences. That issue is quite hard to. The General Assembly had a difficult time really trying to find a number that made sense there, and so kind of bifurcated going to a living facility or a nursing home versus going to a residency. So if this is something that your county or your local government has been dealing or facing with, really would request that you let Kelly and myself know how this new law is is working. Is 6 the right number? Is this relieving some of the pressure that started to be building with these frequent calls? So that's just something we want to make sure you're aware of, but also want some feedback so that we can continue to have those conversations with General Assembly members and other stakeholders. Moving on, House Bill 3098 is a continuation of the electric waste extended producer responsibility bill, mostly known as EPR language. Again, this bill was passed, oh gosh, almost 8 years ago now, which established the e-waste procedures. And so again, just for those who may not be aware of this, your electronic waste is supposed to be recycled and not placed into landfills because of the heavy metals and toxic components that go in that are inside of those. This just basically expanded the list of recyclable electronics that include things like home audio equipment and external computing hardware like mouses and keyboards and even printers and things of that nature. But it also helps producers cover more costs of what is going to be included in those products. And it expands the participation that counties can seek, where if they create their own electronic waste recycling program, they can work with the state overhead committee to get reimbursed for some of those costs. So if you don't have an e-waste program in your county, or if you have one and are thinking about ways to expand it or supplement it, take a look at House Bill 3098. There's going to be some really nice reimbursements once you have a system up in place and running, as long as you work within the parameters of the bill. House Bill 3493, excuse me, deals with local regulation of state facilities. And this really came about because of a fight between the Capital Development Board and a local community where they could not agree on the permitting requirements. And so there was a long battle there. There was a court decision that ruled in favor of the state. And so the state came back and basically is preempting local regulations on state facilities. So no ordinance or permitting requirement of a local government shall be enforced against the construction or reconstruction of a state facility. There are exemptions made for sanitary districts and wastewater systems. But again, this just, basically allows the state not to have to comply with local ordinances. Now, during the course of these conversations, the state said that they do everything in their power to normally comply, with these ordinances. Certainly, they try to comply with all safety ordinances, but this is going to be a change. I'm not necessarily sure this is a change for the better. It seems a bit odd that, if a local government and those locally elected officials put an ordinance in place for their community, that the state can not abide by those. And so I think this is going to be something where this bill, I don't think, will be the final say in this conversation. I think down the road we might need to revisit this, just depending on how things go with the construction of these new facilities and the reconstruction of existing facilities. So something to keep in mind and keep an eye on, especially if you're a community that has a lot of state facilities within your jurisdiction. And Senate Bill 25 is the large energy omnibus package that Kelly mentioned. This bill has not been signed into law yet, but again, we do think this will be signed into law very soon by the governor. This is a continuation of one of the governor's, very large pieces of legislation, CEJA, the Clean Energy Jobs Act. This does a lot of things. This is a very big bill. But I think the most important aspects for local governments is what this does around energy storage projects, excuse me, and a local government's ability to regulate those. We're going to see a lot more battery energy storage systems in our state. We need those to store energy that wind and solar create when wind and solar are able to create them, because wind and solar do not always create energy. And so when they do, when it's windy and when it's very sunny, we're going to need to store that energy so we can utilize it during non-peak generating hours. And so this kind of makes those changes in state law to allow for those systems to come online. But like we saw, I believe in 2019, or it might have been 2020, with wind and solar, when the state took away local government's ability to regulate and cite where those facilities go, those similar provisions removing that local authority were taken away for these energy storage systems. And so again, counties and others will have very little control or say where these are placed. And unlike wind and solar, those large utility scale, or those large utility size scale systems, we're going to see, I think, large battery storage systems. And I also think we might see smaller, more pared down systems that are part of a warehouse facility or an industrial facility, because they might want to store their own energy close by. So we might see these pop up a little more broadly than what we normally think of when we think of large scale utility projects. And so something to keep an eye out on. I do think there's going to be more work done on this energy omnibus package when it's signed into law, as there's always going to be changes, and the state's going to have to respond to how people are utilizing energy. One of the things I know we are going to be facing very soon, and there's already reports on this, is that the state is not producing or procuring enough energy to meet its needs. And so I think one of the pressure points, moving forward is going to be, can we produce and store enough energy for the state's needs? And where are we producing and storing those energies? And are they causing any problems to local communities? I think that's really going to be a pressure point, over the next 5 to 10 years. And because of those pressure points, I think we're going to see a lot more legislation in this space as we move forward. It's almost certain that as we see more of these and the proliferation of these, there's likely going to be some challenges and some problems that take place with these. And as those challenges and problems come up, they're going to need to be addressed. And again, there's going to be opportunity, hopefully, to maybe establish some parameters and some authority for units of local governments, just so they are able to protect their communities. That's the last bill we'll talk about today. If you'll note, these are some important dates for this upcoming spring sessions calendar. The General Assembly is set to adjourn on May 31st, as Kelly mentioned. They get started with the Senate on January 13th and the House on January 20th. Another big date everyone should be aware of is February 18th. And this is when the governor gives the State of the State and budget address. And it will outline the needs of the state, the budgetary pressures of the state, and how the state is going to manage those budgetary pressures. That really kicks off the start of the budget process. And so, February 19th, you're going to really have a good idea, I think, in the newspaper and via other media sources about where the state is. So mark your calendars for February 18th. It will certainly be something to keep be mindful of and keep on calendars.
Terrific,
thank,
Taylor.
oh, go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
Mike.
Kelly.
Oh, I was gonna thank Taylor. I did want to let you know before we adjourn here, and if there's any questions too, coming into the chat box. We do have a published report we do, and these are primarily for our Illinois county government officials. We have our counties at the Capitol, we publish throughout session, and that just gives updates on bills and their status and where we're at on things. So those go out to the county governments, but we do publish a new laws summary every year. And that is available. It's on our website. It's about a 12-page report. It's much more inclusive than what we could have time for today. And it breaks out in categories. So you can get that. I also sent it to Mike, so he'll send it out to you today. So you'll have that new laws summary to review. In addition, we publish these insight research briefs, and they are on our website too, under resources, under publications. So if you're interested in some of the laws that govern local government and state government, like ethics, open meetings, freedom of information, these are great reference materials. So they are on our website, these research briefs, and we do them occasionally on certain subject matters. But again, these are the primary ones when it comes to kind of local government educational efforts. And then also, we have, Taylor, if you want to flip one more, we've got our Inside the Courthouse publication, and that's available on our website as well. I don't know if Taylor's still on there. He can flip it, but anyway, that covers all of the elected officials. Oh, that covers all the elected officials' offices at the county level, and it gives an explanation of those to the general public. The Inside the Courthouse is really great. Even if you're a newly elected official, kind of provides you insight into the mandatory functions of each of the elected officials' offices at the county level, your discretionary functions, your duties, training requirements, things like that. So again, it's on our website. It's available under publications, and I think you'll find it a nice read. And again, if you want to share that with anybody that has an interest in county government, it's a nice brief overview of all of the elected officials' offices. So if you have any questions on any of the publications, or you need some more information on those, you can always email me as well, but they are on our website at theilcounty.org.
Terrific, Kelly. Those are going to be great resources for everybody. And as Kelly noted, we will get those out to you in the follow-up email that all registered participants will be receiving within the next couple of days. We do have a couple minutes for a couple questions that were posed over the course of the presentation. We'll circle back to one that was started out fairly early with respect to the type of safety cameras that were identified in the poll camera legislation. There was a question posed about who might own the data for the flock safety cameras, and is it if they want to know, or does it require them to know? Those are two pretty subtle details that are probably included in the legislation. Kelly or Taylor, any ideas there, or does that require a deeper dive into the statute, the proposed statute?
I'll let Taylor answer, but this was an initiative of the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police. So when I mentioned that the flock cameras were referenced, they were part of the debate on the bill. This was mainly put in place, like I said, by the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police. It was their initiative. The governor supported it for public safety and law enforcement purposes. I don't believe it's necessarily going in place for the things that you would likely see in other aspects. And again, the Illinois Attorney General's office was involved. There are other aspects with respect to certain cameras and what they are recording. So again, this was mainly for public safety purposes. But Taylor, do you have any background on that? I know it was Chief of Police Bill.
Yeah, Kelly was the chief of police bill, and with regards to specifically block cameras, and who owns that, I'm not sure. I don't know if that's something that's worked out or agreed upon in the contract, or between whatever local government agency is utilizing that. So that's something we'll have to maybe take a deeper dive on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and one quick correction there. The reference to if they want to know or does it require them to know was actually in reference to the Massey bill with respect to the records. So again, probably a deeper dive into the specific language of the statute would be required there.
I believe that the hiring law enforcement agency has to make a request.
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time? There was a bit muddied there, Taylor.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I said I believe that the law enforcement agency that would be doing the hiring has to make a request
Okay.
To get that information.
So again, and certainly the language, specific language in the statute is going to be determinative, and
That's correct.
it will behoove everybody to take a closer look at the specific wording. Thanks. A question with respect to the IDOT portal. Do we know when it's supposed to be online and available for use per the legislation?
I believe originally, excuse me, it was, I believe originally it was effective immediately. And then there was some conversation about placing, language in there, make it subject to, excuse me, corporations, which obviously would delay when it's supposed to be up and running. I believe that language wasn't included, and so it should be something that they're already working on. There's not really a date included about when they have to have this up and running, but it was an effective immediate date. So it took effect it took effect January 1st of 2026. When IDOT gets around to actually doing it, I'm not sure. This is something we're going to continue to have conversations with IDOT regarding, but there's no firm date when that program needs to be.
Okay, thanks. With respect to Senate Bill 1723 and the carbon sequestration provisions, is this going to put a hold on any CO2 capture projects that are already at the EPA reflection stage and is slated to be okay for proceeding for injection in February 2026? This apparently has its roots in a particular capture project near Hennepin. Do we know whether it'll apply to existing projects or is it only prospective?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends, I guess, is the the non-satisfactory answer. Because of the definition that was placed in the bill, this is really focused on sole source aquifers. And that basically means that it has to be designated as a sole source aquifer, I believe, through the US EPA. And that has to do with how many people, whether it's safe drinking water, how many people utilize that. So I'm not sure if the project that we're referencing is a sole source aquifer or not. So that's that would be question number one.
Thank you for that.
I guess, sorry, I just should say that, if it is a sole source aquifer, this does add language that no person shall conduct, these type of activities that overlays, underlays, or passes through such an aquifer. But again, I think the question is whether or not the specific project they're referencing is considered a sole source aquifer.
Yeah. So again, one of those situations where reference to the specific language in the bill is going to be necessary to provide a really comprehensive answer to that particular question. Okay, we've reached 1 o'clock. If we've got one or two more questions remaining. Quickly, does Senate Bill 25 include anything related to windmills, specifically restrictions on fees established by the local governments?
Yes, it does. One of the changes in the bill, and again, we could have had an hour seminar just likely on the changes that are contained within Senate Bill 25, but it does place a cap and restriction on the fees both for wind and solar. So for those large utility scale developments for wind and solar, this Senate Bill 25 does contain restriction on fees by the local government.
Okay. And then finally, one last question we'll address. Is there any new information, excuse me, on star bonds or opportunity zones?
I'm not sure in what context, I guess they're referencing that. There continues to be, talks about ways the state can spur economic development. And whether or not, that's via star bonds or another type of program. But I guess I'm not quite sure what information they're looking for with regards to those two specific zone designations.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Actually, there is one last question if we've got just an extra moment. Is there anything, again, pertaining to Senate Bill 25, is there anything in Senate Bill 25 to address the rural counties' inability to execute mass evacuations and fire suppression of battery storage systems? Very specific point raised there.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a concern that, again, we could have a whole hour on Senate Bill 25. The short answer is, in my opinion, the bill does not do enough to address what happens if one of these facilities and it has a catastrophic fire emergency. And it does not do enough to provide resources to local communities or to fire protection districts.
Right,
Okay,
and I will add to this. We are currently, as the state association, we are working with our legal counsel. We have drafts prepared on this bill to assist counties in both those that are zone counties and unzoned counties with respect to aspects of Senate Bill 25. And we will also be doing some future educational seminars, both remote and in person, to assist our county government, our different office holders and the engineers as well, assessment officers, zoning officials, planners, and everything working with the components of Senate Bill 25. So there will be future educational opportunities on this. We are basically right now waiting for the governor to sign the bill. Once that takes place, we will be able to move forward in further assistance to our county governments with respect to adoption of specific ordinances and also education.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Kelly. We'll look forward to those things. Those are great programming, and I'm sure everybody on the call and their related colleagues will be interested in taking part. Man, it's been a whirlwind hour, but we are beyond the end of our time. On behalf of the University of Illinois of Extension, I really want to thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Taylor, for your presentations today. As I mentioned earlier, if you registered for the webinar, and I've seen that a number of people have done this already, you will receive presentation materials and a link to the recording in a follow-up email. But if you didn't register for it and would like the materials, just drop your email into the chat. Again, we'll also, if you're so inclined, add your email to our webinar subscription list, so you'll receive advance notice of upcoming webinar offerings. We've got a lot of programming already in the docket for this year. For example, at the start of the month, or at the end of the month, on Thursday, January 29th, we'll be following up again at high noon with our annual federal legislative update, delivered in partnership with the National Association of Counties. Be sure to join us for that. I'd also want to invite you to visit our website at go.illinois.edu/LGE. That'll give you access to our video archives with a link to our YouTube channel with an extensive collection of our prior presentations on a wide variety of community development related topics. So thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Best wishes to everybody for a successful and healthy 2026, and we hope to see you back for future presentations. Thanks.